Create with Fran Sydney. Hello everyone, welcome to the show. We are today on episode 77 and it will be my pleasure today to talk about 10 tips we can use to raise kids that have the kind of self-reliance that we've been talking about and that is so valuable in us. So stay tuned, and this is going to be all evidence-based, so not just fluff taken from maybe a magazine, but something that actually has been proven to work. And what more do we want than knowing that those techniques can really help our children and teens to become responsible and self-adjusted, balanced individuals? So stay tuned. Just remembering from a past episode that when we are not self-reliant emotionally, we are not able to cope with problems and make decisions that are good for ourselves. So we might turn to drugs or to other very sad things to try to cope with stress and problems. So when we have objective as parents, one should really be to create this independent child so he can make those decisions and he can ask for help when needed, and he's got the confidence that he can do things. And if you remember, there are so many books about this. It can be quite a conundrum to decide what to do. But really, success in life does not depend on how much our parents give us as to wealth and maybe availability to entertain, but really the ability to think for ourselves and to solve problems. You will also find that this is so invaluable when you look for work, so why not do this? I remember that there was a study done in a university many years ago, and I read this before doing the podcast, so I didn't save the episode or the article that I read, and basically was saying that the students in a certain group in a university were divided in two further groups. One was just doing as normal, but he was told, oh, you're so smart, you're so clever, you're gonna do so well at university. And the other group was always told, oh, you're working so hard, you're so good at solving problems. And in the end of the study, the people who were told they were smart, they were not showing any efforts, they were not improving in their studies and in their exams, while the others were working harder and getting more results. So this connects really well with one of the growth mindset parenting concepts, that is that we can teach our children and our teens that they have this power to change most of the situations in their lives. So this achievement though comes when they put in the work, the effort, and they have strategy. It's not about being talented or being born smart or having a lot of luck or having money. So our growth mindset suggests that we can view the events in a different way. We can be set back by an event, or we can say, oh, I can do something about this, I can improve. So it's important to see that a child that has a growth mindset thinks, oh yeah, I'm not doing well in this yet, but I'm gonna get better. I can apply myself, I can get a university test, I can get a job, I can get my friends to come back to me and do that activity. While if a child has developed a fixed mindset, he will see things as immutable, they cannot change. This is typical of very, very small children. You know, when you leave a room, they start crying because they think you are never going to come back. But as a child grows up, he's 10 years old, he shouldn't think that. He should think that things are temporary, not all the problems are for the rest of their life. So it's important that we use the words that help others and our children to deal with the mistakes that they make or that we make in a different way. Think this is not forever. And so always remember to say, instead of saying how smart you are, how talented you are, say, well, I'm so glad you work so hard, that you focus so much, etc., etc. So I thought it was a great beginning point for our conversation. So I think it's very important not to give up when we have problems. Problems can be sometimes very temporary, or we can become resilient. So it's important that we ask our children, what are you going to do next time so this doesn't happen? What else can we try that we haven't thought about? And so when the child has found a way, we need to recognize that and say, it's so good that you found another way, and this way works for you. And that, he will say to himself, oh yeah, I'm good at finding solutions. And the more he says that to himself, the more his RAS, the reticular activating system, will do things to prove that he is good at solving problems. Well, if we do the opposite and we say, you're so unlucky, your friends are so toxic, and then it's all outside of him, he can't do anything, he'll be a victim. And therefore, what is important to me is that we give a child the understanding that to give the performance, to be the good at the trampoline, or to do the piece of writing that he needs to do, he needs to think strategically. He needs to put the effort and not just give up and think, oh, today I can't do this because, and he quotes something external. And this will make his self-reliance so much bigger, and the ability to do things on his own, on her own, which if you think it will translate later in an adult, they will be a problem solver. And there is an entire podcast episode about this in the past, probably 20 episodes ago, maybe in spring. I talked about the fact that when people are hiring and firing, they look at candidates, not just the titles, etc., of experience, but look at how these people can solve problems within the company. So let's start with when we are younger. And if we haven't done it yet, and our teens are becoming a little bit negative, etc., maybe it's a time to have a sit down and say, you know what, I want to change things. And one of the ways that we can do that, amazingly, is to learn about gratitude. And this is so important because we are not used to say thank you for this, thank you for that. We are a little bit the entitled generation. But when we are thinking about what we are grateful for, we acknowledge something positive in our life, and that makes us stronger. Even our immune system, research says, it becomes stronger. Our depression is less when we start looking for the positive that is happening. Our stress, our anxiety are less. So we look at life in a more positive way that is so good for us. And so if we practice being grateful, then we're going to be more likely willing to help others, more generous, more easy to be with. And how is that going to be helping us to be self-reliant? Of course, because people will want to be around us and work with us. And we're going to find great networking opportunities because we are grateful. And so we have stronger relationship with other people. So we want to count our blessings instead of always looking at all the problems that we have. We're going to be more attentive. We're going to have more energy. And so this is something that we can learn. It's a skill that we can acquire. We do not have to be born with this skill. And so when we teach our children to say thank you and to look at the good things that there are, we are picking up a specific moment, for example, every day, maybe during the meal, and say, is there something that you're really happy about, that you're grateful for? Then we keep putting the attention on that and not on what is going wrong. And that might remind the child, oh wow, things are going well here, and I have a power to make even more beautiful things happen. Now you won't believe the next point I'm going to talk about, and it's about allowing our children to be bored. Now there is a fine line here. I have to be careful because we don't want people to have absolutely nothing around them and be in an empty room. I always say it's not very clever that we put in roads and in parks all these signs: no cycling, no roller skating, no ball games, and then therefore teenagers are bored to death, they can't do anything, and they might end up in a wrong group of people. They might end up slashing things up because they have nothing to do. So that's not what I'm talking about. Do not misunderstand me or quote me out of context. What I'm talking about is it really true that our children should be filled with entertainment for the whole day? So maybe they don't disturb us because they are busy. Should they have toys everywhere? Some will tell college, water everywhere. But in some bedrooms, it's toys everywhere. Because there are toys everywhere, and video games, and social media, and Legos everywhere. And I love Legos, but is it possible that these toys can be stifling the creativity of a child? And so I wanted to quote a German study that was done years ago. And in this study, they were saying, well, children actually use toys to escape other situations. And that was an interesting point of view, right? And I was just thinking, what is the impact that we could have when we take away the toys and we look at the problem-solving skills, the critical thinking skills, and how creative these children can be. And during this research, it was important that the researchers were picking up that the children were always looking for the newer toy, bigger toy, shinier, faster. So the latest thing. Everyone had to have the latest. So if you give them 20 toys, they might play with 2 or 3. If I have 5, 50, 200, they might never find the time to actually focus on one that they really like. And the researchers in this study in Germany, they went to a toy-free daycare center. There were 2 groups of children, and a group of children for 3 months had no toys, and the other group was fine and had all the toys. But the children that had no toys, after the period, they were studied and they were more creative. They were more confident, they were more balanced, and they could speak their mind, they can help others and themselves to achieve those things they really wanted to achieve. While the others were just playing with toys and maybe a little bit like when you do a coloring book, you're a little bit distracted. So that was so interesting. And I remember when I was young, there were periods when I had very few toys, and a period when you have a little room that had loads of toys. But then we could only go there for a certain amount of time. And we always had to find something to do. And when I was about 10, I remember playing with a little toy hammer and a carton box, and that was it. It was so creative for me. And so think about what you're giving to your children. How is that going to help them? Is it too much? Are they bored and smashing everything? Maybe take away some of the toys and give them more educational things or more creative things, instead of just doing things that have all these bells and whistles, but they're not really helping them to get themselves out of boredom. Because later on, when the child grows up, if he's bored, could he be experimenting with drugs or doing things that are very dangerous? So let's make sure that we do not give any excuse, to our parents. Oh, well, I was so busy. The child was always on his own playing with the toys. Well, that doesn't help them. They need to get out and about and talk to people and do things, and not just play without much thinking with hundreds and hundreds of toys. So we can maybe scroll on Facebook or get on with important work. Just a thing. It's not a criticism, but something we can all look back and say, oh yeah, perhaps I tried to give too much because I didn't have. But would this be helpful? Now, if you're aged 50 plus, you will know that when you were young, your parents would ask you to do chores in the house. Maybe you were taking the bin or putting the socks together. Maybe you were helping in the garden. Everyone had to work. Nowadays, a lot of parents think, oh, no, there's no point. I should not ask my children because they're so busy with work, so I just do it, or I have a person doing it. But actually, the science says that is not the right approach to allow our kids to do nothing in the house. Because it's only when we allow them to do things that they will learn how to be independent. And so they will get the confidence of knowing, oh yeah, I can wash the dishes. Of course, the first few months are going to be slow, they're going to be messy. But if we encourage them to do household chores that are appropriate for their age, they will be more confident. And so we could start very early. And when they are not allowed to do any household chores, they cannot develop those skills that they will need anyway when they move on, when they go and live with other students or with other adults, or when they get married. And so when we give chores, there is a benefit in the social world, in the emotional area, and of course academically. So he's learning responsibility, and this makes him so accountable, So he said, well, the child today has not brought the bin outside, so now we have a very full bin, and we have to cope with that for 2 weeks until the next time for picking up is due. The child will learn that there is a consequence for not doing things. I'm not saying punish them, but just a natural consequence. If you never clean, if you never tidy up, how can you know how hard that is to do? And a lot of children have to learn this when they're 20 because they were not told to do this when they were young. So find something that you can give to the children. Maybe agree together, maybe a chore. And if you're older, maybe it's time to have a little sit down and say, okay, let's do this and let's talk about it. See something that will be helpful for you, but it's really helpful for them to become self-reliant. So then think about it when they get married. They will not be, those kind of kings and princesses that sit down waiting to be served, but they will be very pleasant to be about because it will be helpful and they will be grown up and responsible. How wonderful! I just wanted to come back for a minute to this concept of being bored. There were studies talking about being bored, so just staring in the nothing, imagination, thinking about whatever, and maybe just do absolutely nothing. There is a point in the day when we need the time we're not talking to anyone else, we're not watching television, we're not making anything, we're not doing work, we're just bored, we're just sitting there, there is nothing to do for a few minutes. We do not need to have television going the whole time. And so I think it helps us to start thinking of who we are, why we're here, where are we going, what's the next thing, what do we really want. It's a quiet time, that meditation time. We all need that. And then if we then create in the house a stimulating environment and some structure, then the child can look around and do things. So we want to nurture this boredom so that it is constructive. There are a list of things that we can do in lots of books. So how can we manage boredom? It is something that the child wants to explore. How can you think about thinking and acting about different things? How can you cope with problems? He needs to develop the kind of concentration and focus for doing tasks. But if he never has this time to sit down quietly and think and then look at what is around him and analyze it, he can't develop. So the time comes for every child to become independent. There are few things he can do independently. Maybe there is a point where he gets dressed or does up the shoelaces and then start deciding what he's going to eat, etc. So when we practice that, to let the child make some decisions, but not allowing him to decide how we're going to live our life, that's a different thing, right? Then you can ask him, okay, you want to do this project, how will you do this? How can you get there? Yeah, so things that this what, which, when, how questions, they help him to understand, oh, he's in charge of this. So if he has a problem with a toy that is not working properly, with homework, you can always say, okay, what would you do to fix this if, and we talk about hypothetical or hypothetical situation. What do you want to do? Or which one do you want? Instead of just assuming that we know what we want, sometimes ask, what do you think about this? How can we change this? If you did this action, what would change? So let them think, so they feel more independent, more responsible. So we have limits, but we have a structure, and they act within this framework that we have put together. As an example, when we talk about chores and we assign them together, if we do all the talking about it together, and the child is able to pick within a few chores which one he's going to do, he's going to be feeling more responsible because he was part of that decision. If we talk about the curfew time, what time are you going to be home after doing this and that? Or how much work, how much television time? If we decide together, then it's more likely he will be helpful and willing to do what we said and what we decided together. So we transfer his autonomy so then he can manage his behavior. And there are so many people that at 20, 30, they go and live with somebody else, maybe they're a student at university, maybe they get married, and they can't manage those behaviors. So they have addictions, they can't stop playing games, or even worse, going to porn website the whole time. They can't stop anything because they didn't learn how to manage their own inner impulses. So this is so important to remember. There are also ways of giving control, even in things that we have pretty much decided. So if we want a child to have a shower and to do the homework, we can always say, well, would you like to do the homework first or the shower first? But this implies that he's going to do both. Okay, but he gets to choose something. Would you like your shower now or would you like it in 5 minutes? Would you like to go back at 8 or to be in bed by 8:30? So there are all these questions and things that, oh no, but mom, you're taking too much, oh, I don't want to do this. But if you give them a little bit of choice, then they learn how to decide things. And this is so good. And let's move on to the next bit. Now this is all about building the self-esteem, the self-confidence in our children. And as a therapist, I see a lot of people who have a very shattered self-esteem because when they grew up, either their parents or their teachers or maybe the people around them, they used words that were really hurtful or they were interpreted as such. And so their confidence is so bad, they're full of anxiety, depression, and even self-harming. And I have to rebuild them. And doing so much work with clients has helped me to think, oh my word, who knows how many words I said without realizing that might have been interpreted in a way that I didn't mean to, and I may be creating all this trauma in my children. So I want to reassure you, first of all, we all make mistakes. We cannot possibly forecast everything. But, and also there is therapy, but we shouldn't use words without thinking. There used to be something people say, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never break me. Well, maybe Tony Robbins can say that. Words will never break me because he's, completely invincible. But most mortal people do not want to hear that, because when we repeat words that are really defeating the whole purpose of building self-reliance, when we are putting down another person and being critical and make them feel that they are a complete failure, then the child will start hearing it all over, and he might believe this and he might live to fulfill this prophecy. So because we as humans tend to act in the same way that is expected of us. So people keep saying, oh, you're such a true gentleman, you're so good, you're so kind, you always open the door for other people. Or maybe we say, oh, you're such a good cook, you're so good in the kitchen. People start thinking, yeah, I'm good at this. Yeah, they repeat it to themselves. And then they have to live to that expectation, you expect it of them. So it's important that the words that we use are used to build their personality. It's a little personality with children are tiny, but we do shape this relationship we have with people. How do we make them feel? Do we feel rubbish when we're together? So think about that, right? And also consider when we have a positive expectation from the child, this will affect his reality, how he lives, how he acts, and all his future. So, but when we say to a person, oh, you're going to the tree, you're just going to fall, you're going to get hurt. Well, guess what? He's not going to really focus on getting safe into the tree. He's going to think about failure. But instead I say, oh gosh, my child is on the tree and I never knew he could go on a tree. And you think, okay, hold on tight, you're doing well. Do this so that give him instruction to stay nice and tight and safe. But don't say you're going to fall. Because if you keep saying you're going to fall, he is going to fall because that's what he's focusing on. So, and also it makes him feel very poorly about having a nice experience, such as climbing a tree. And I remember having this when my own kids were on trees all the time. And, now one is in tall bikes and The other one can still do trees. And why? Because I let them, and they never fail. In all these years, I never gave him instructions. I said, hold on tight. And they were absolutely fine. And we do have a big chestnut tree. So sometimes we have to be a little bit careful with the kids. I'm not saying I was perfect at all, but our words are saying what we're thinking about them. So if we keep thinking we're going to fail on something, and we say that, we are not going to build them up. So always remember, they're not born as a leader, they're not born as a smart person, they're not born as sloppy or very productive. They're born pretty much, ready to absorb anything that is around them. They can become sport people, artists, lawyers, agricultural experts, hairdressers. They can become nice, kind, or aggressive. They become things. But this depends on the environment, what they hear, how they internalize the words that we say, and how they perceive life. So remember, these labels that we put on them should be always positive. Okay? Also, as a side note, don't praise the child for something he has not done. Sometimes we are so over-positive that even when the child was not paying attention in the class, has not done the work, has disturbed everyone else, then when we pick them up, oh, well done! Well done for what? So then he's learning that he can get praise without making any effort. So be careful that we do not go on the opposite side and we praise the lack of effort just for the sake of doing something positive. And now let's talk for a little while about the strengths and the weaknesses of a person. So we all have strengths and they can make our self-reliance a lot better, right? And so our view as parents could be that if we keep pushing and pushing, maybe something that is very weak in our child may become really good and strong. And some people don't agree with this. For example, Mary Reckmeyer, who wrote a book called Strengths-Based Parenting, said, if we try to fix what is wrong in our child, so look at what is weak, we are preventing the child from developing the talent that she has there in a bud, and it could be growing a lot faster. And Mary says that if we push the kids to be perfect in an area where they're not really inclined, so we are forcing them to live to our standards, but they're not really truly feeling great about it. And we should instead understand what is unique about our children and not just thinking, oh, everyone else here has a grade 5 piano, so they have to have a great piano. Everyone else is playing baseball, so they should be very good at baseball, so they get a grant. It shouldn't be like that. So if we focus on what we are strong at, and this happens a lot when you do homeschooling, because you can actually do that, if you practice those activities, and do everything, do the things that he likes, the things he doesn't like. But instead of just pushing too hard on what is not very good, allow them to develop what they already have that is looking great. And this will increase their self-reliance, their resilience, and also, if you think about it, it will make the stress level decrease, because when we are forced to do something that we do not like, over and over until we are really good, it just really goes against the grain. It is really griping pain, and maybe we don't like it for a particular reason. There must be something else. And it's good to use what we are strong at when we have a stressful situation. And sometimes we have to develop this later on. We might get chronic disease when we're older. We will have to develop these skills. And how great it is to have a strength-based approach, to see ourselves as a successful person, and then later on, when challenges will come, and it's when, not if, we can use those skills that we have, those talents that we have, to face them with great success. Surprisingly, studies saying that when we spend time hanging out with our children, this is also a great way of making them feel that they belong. and increase their happiness. And we don't need to do anything very, very particular. It can be a simple activity. You could be just outside in the garden throwing a ball here and there, or you could be playing a board game or something. So remember that the quality of your time is very important. If you're 12 hours a day together, but you are on each other's nerves all the time, that is not helpful. Do something fun together if you can. That really helps people to feel great. And now it's time to look at the 10th point, which is talking about emotional intelligence. Now, maybe emotions are not something that we talk about much in our families. And it wasn't really something that people used to do when I was younger. People didn't talk about how they feel. They just got on with life, right? But the emotional intelligence can determine the outcomes they will have academically or psychologically and even in society. So it's important to learn from when we are young how to eliminate stimuli that can be disturbing by creating strategies that are very, very useful. So learn how to become calm, learn how to diffuse our own anger, and this will help us to build much better relationships, have better interactions, and become empathetic when other people have issues and not look at them as weak or victims. And also we need to learn how to understand we all have emotions, how to express them, how to respond to them, and how to control the impulse. Perhaps, for example, you take away my toy and I go and punch you. How do we deal with frustration? So these are things that I think the children should learn by hopefully watching the parents doing this correctly, maybe reading a book together about it. And so something appropriate for the age could be maybe a book that tells them how to identify emotions, making faces. It's important. The face expression tells a lot about a person, even if you are not talking. So looking at the smile, what does that mean? Or looking at the eye expression or the body language, understanding this and asking yourself, why does that teddy bear look so sad? Why does that lady bear look so happy? So it takes a lot of work to raise a very happy and confident child, but it's really about understanding what can make him grow. And sometimes the things that we avoid giving to the child because we think they're too tough are the very things that will help him to make him grow. Well, I hope that this episode was useful for you guys. It's 32 minutes long so far, going 33 now, and I hope that you found something that maybe you can try this week and maybe say something more positive to your child, or maybe a curb if you've been praising without making any effort there. Then you have to withdraw a little bit and see what happens. See the effort happening. Always praise effort. Not everyone will get the same results. So let me know if this episode has been useful for you, and feel free to share it with other people. In the end of this week, I will be interviewing and recording an episode with Kevin Payne, who will be talking about how he's been battling MS for 30 years plus, and he managed to go from basically being unable to feel his legs and maybe have a very bad life, if I've been living as a victim. He went from that to being jumping from airplanes and, skydiving over 500 times. He was 26 seconds far from his own death. And think about it, when you cannot feel your legs and you are throwing yourself down from an airplane and you have to force yourself to save your life 500 times. How does your body respond to that? And so the next episode will be an inspirational one, talking about living with chronic disease and how to turn any chronic disease, not just MS, into something that will propel your life instead of living like a victim. So thank you so much for being with me. Stay tuned for next week and take care. Bye-bye. You have listened to Create with France Sydney.